A fishing net came up 25 miles off the coast of England with something in it that could not exist. A block of peat. Peat forms in bogs, on land, above the waterline, and it does not grow on the floor of the North Sea. And when a fisherman split that lump open with a shovel, there was a harpoon inside it, carved from red deer antler, barbed along one edge, made by a human hand about 12,000 years ago, which means a man once stood on dry ground, in daylight, holding that harpoon. And that ground is now under 120 feet of cold gray water. He was standing in a country called Doggerland, and you will not find it on any map. What gets me about this is how close it came to being thrown back. The boat was the Colinda. The month was September 1931, and the skipper who swung the shovel was called Pilgrim Lockwood. He was trying to break up the peat and throw it back over the side. Halfway through the swing, the blade hit something hard, and he said afterwards it rang like metal. Nobody on that deck understood what they were holding. Found in 1931, it was not properly dated until 1988. And when the number came back, it rearranged European prehistory. Because the peat proved the harpoon had been lost on land, by somebody walking around out there on solid ground. The North Sea is younger than farming. Underneath it, sealed in mud and silt, lies an entire country that no map has ever shown you. Its name is Doggerland, and I want to tell you what we have pulled out of it, how it died, and why the last part of that story was quietly rewritten in the past few years. Start with the shape of the place. During the last ice age, so much of the planet's water was locked into ice sheets that global sea level sat far lower than it does now. The shallow basin between Britain and continental Europe was simply dry. Rolling hills, river valleys thick with trees, reed marshes, shallow lagoons, salt flats, freshwater lakes. Britain was not an island at all. You could have walked from what is now Yorkshire to what is now Denmark without getting your feet wet. For a long time, archaeologists treated that plain as a corridor, a land bridge, scenery that people hurried across on their way somewhere better. Finds from the last 30 years have destroyed that idea completely. Here is the scale. In its later phase, after earlier flooding had already taken a bite out of it, Doggerland still covered something like 46,000 square kilometers. Researchers working with seismic data have now surveyed about 188,000 square kilometers of seabed around it, an area of survey comparable to England and Scotland put together. Down there are riverbeds you can trace for miles, old coastlines, the outlines of hills. Calling that a bridge between two places misses what it actually was, a place, and our man with the harpoon lived on it. He was a Mesolithic hunter-gatherer, and by the standards of his world, he had been born into the best real estate in Europe. Wetlands are generous. Rivers meeting a coast means fish in enormous numbers, migrating birds overhead, shellfish beds, red deer and wild boar coming down to drink. Add hazelnuts, berries, roots, reeds for building. Follow his year. Spring on the estuary, when the fish run and the birds come back in flocks that darken the sky. Summer inland, up the river valleys, hunting deer in open woodland and stripping hazel. Autumn spent laying in nuts and drying meat for the cold. Winter in sheltered low ground near the coast, where the sea keeps the frost softer than it is further inland. That was a working life with margin in it, repeated so many times that the roots themselves became a kind of inherited property, handed down like tools. The tools say the same thing. Bone points, barbed harpoons for fish and fowl, worked flint blades, antler mattocks, wooden hafts. Some of the pieces dragged off that seabed are finished with more care than the job required. Desperate people do not decorate. They had time to spare and craft worth passing on. So how do we know any of this if the whole country sits under a sea? Mostly, at first, by accident. The Colinda harpoon was not a one-off. All through the 20th century, trawlers kept hauling up things that make no sense on a seabed. Mammoth tusks, rhino bone, antler picks, and worked flint. Fragments of human skull, which is a strange thing to find in a net between crates of cod. Lion and hyena remains too, from the colder centuries, because this plain was open steppe long before it was woodland, and it carried the animals to match. Fishermen sometimes threw them back, and sometimes carried them into port, where a curious harbor master or a local museum began asking questions. Piece by piece, a picture assembled itself out of bycatch. For most of the 20th century, that was the whole method. Wait for a trawler to hit something, hope the crew kept it, hope somebody ashore recognized what it was. An unknown amount of Doggerland has gone over the side of fishing boats and back into the sea, unrecorded, by men who had no reason to think a lump of bone mattered. There are known hotspots now, stretches of bank where the finds cluster so thickly that researchers work directly with fishing fleets, asking skippers to log positions and keep anything odd. Some of the best material in the collections arrived because a crew took the trouble. Then, seismic data rewrote the whole field. Oil and gas companies had spent decades mapping the North Sea floor with seismic surveys, firing sound down through the water and reading what bounced back. Researchers realized the same data, reprocessed, could see through the silt to the buried country underneath. What emerged was a map of a drowned world. Rivers with names now, hills with contours, a coastline, a great tidal estuary. A team at Bradford has spent years turning that into a reconstruction you can fly across on a screen. Valley by valley, the way you would survey a country you still intended to visit. The seismic map is only half of it. The other half comes out of cores, long tubes of sediment punched down into the seabed and pulled up in sequence, because mud stacks in order and the oldest layer sits at the bottom. Inside those cores are pollen grains, and pollen is stubbornly identifiable, so a specialist can read which trees and grasses were standing at a given depth. That is how you turn a contour map into a living country. This layer is birch woodland. This one is reed swamp. This one is salt marsh, which means the sea had already arrived here by then. A word about what that reconstruction can and cannot do, because I think the honesty here is the best part of the field. It gives us the bones of the country, where water ran and where the ground rose. It does not give us a single excavated village, because nothing that fragile survives 8 millennia under a sea that gets dragged by trawl gear every week. The map is real. The people on it are inference. Every archaeologist working on this will tell you the same. And the gap is the most frustrating thing in the field. There is a strange modern twist to all this. The North Sea is being built on. Wind farms, cables, pipelines, all of it requiring surveys of the seabed before anything gets driven into the ground. That work has handed archaeology more high-resolution data about Doggerland in 20 years than the previous century managed. And it has also put the drowned country on a clock. Every turbine foundation is a hole punched through a landscape nobody has excavated yet. The people who study this are in the odd position of depending on the industry that is disturbing the thing they study. Which brings us to the question everybody actually wants answered, and the one I went looking into this for. How did it end? The honest answer begins slower and sadder than you would like. The ice sheets were melting and the water was coming home. Not in a night, over centuries. Sea level climbed And because Doggerland was flat and low and gentle, a small rise swallowed a shocking amount of ground. There are stretches where the coastline moved inland by a kilometer or more within a single human lifetime. It helps to know what the water was actually doing. This was not a steady creep. Meltwater came off the ice sheets in surges. In the worst of them, the sea climbed a meter or more within a couple of generations. On ground this flat, that takes whole districts inside a lifetime. Between surges, there were long, quiet stretches where the coast barely moved, and a family could convince itself the worst was finished. You get a bad decade, then two good ones, and the good ones are what people plan around. So think about our hunter again, but older now, with grandchildren. The good fishing spot floods and turns brackish. The path to the summer camp becomes marsh, then open water. The place where his family buried its dead becomes a shallow lagoon, then simply sea. Nobody in that world had the words sea level rise. What they had was a map carried in the head, refined over generations and passed down as carefully as any harpoon. And that map was turning into a lie faster than the old people could correct it. Every generation inherited a smaller country than the one their parents had been taught. That is the real story of Doggerland, and it ran for thousands of years. But there was also one very bad day. About 8,000 years ago, off the coast of Norway, a colossal section of the continental shelf gave way. Geologists call it the Storegga slide, one of the largest submarine landslides known from the entire Holocene. Something on the order of 3,200 cubic kilometers of sediment collapsed and poured downslope. To put that in something you can picture, enough material to bury the whole of Wales under a layer of rock and mud roughly 150 meters deep. When that much mass moves that fast underwater, it shoves the ocean aside. The ocean has to go somewhere. What it produced was a tsunami across the northern seas. Modeling puts the run up at 20 meters and above in the Shetlands, 10 to 12 meters along the Norwegian coast, around 5 meters on the east coast of Scotland. Those are numbers for places with real terrain, cliffs and hills for a wave to climb. Doggerland had almost none. On a low, flat, waterlogged plain, a wave does not stop at a shoreline. It keeps going inland for a very long way. For decades, that was the ending everybody told. The last of the lost country, drowned in an afternoon by one enormous wave. Clean, cinematic, and exactly the ending a story wants. Recent work has complicated it, and the complication is stranger than the tidy version. Researchers went looking for the tsunami signature in sediment cores from the southern North Sea, the sector closest to what was left of Doggerland. They found the wave. They also found evidence that it left plenty standing. Parts of the country appear to have survived it. Small islands sitting above the water's reach, with life apparently carrying on there afterwards. That wave was a catastrophe, without question. Yet it seems to have been an episode rather than the final chapter. What seems to have finished Doggerland was the thing that had been eating it for 3 millennia already. The sea simply kept rising. I want to be straight with you, because this is still an active argument, and I am not in a position to settle it for you. Some researchers weight the tsunami as the decisive blow. Others read the same cores and see a place that limped on for centuries. What nobody disputes is the slide, its scale, and the wave it made. The disagreement is over how much of the ending it actually wrote. If the revised picture holds, it is grimmer than the wave. It means generations of the last people of Doggerland lived on shrinking islands, watching the horizon come closer, almost certainly aware of exactly where this was going. Then, one year, the crossing was too far, or the fresh water turned salt, or the last high ground went under on a spring tide. A country ran out of room. There is something else the evidence points to, and it changes how the ending feels. Along the retreating coasts of northern Europe, in that same window, You find settlements reorganizing, new fishing gear, heavier investment in boats and coastal resources. They adapted hard, generation after generation, right up until the ground they were adapting on stopped existing. They were good at their lives, and in the end, it made no difference. Everything we know about them, we know because a machine built to catch fish dragged their belongings out of the dark by accident. A tusk in a net, a harpoon in a lump of peat, sitting on a wet deck between crates of cod 12,000 years after a man finished carving it. The sea that took Doggerland is handing it back to us at random, one piece at a time, and we are simply there to catch it. So the next time you see that neat blue gap on a map between England and Denmark, know that you are looking at a flooded country, with rivers and hills and camps and graves still down there in the mud, drowned recently enough that human beings lived through every stage of it. Headlines like to call it an Atlantis, but Atlantis was invented by a philosopher to make an argument about hubris. This place was real, it was full of people, and the sea took it slowly enough that they had to keep adapting until there was nothing left to adapt to. A climate system finished what it had started. The water went where physics sent it, and a country that had fed people for thousands of seasons became a fishing ground. Somewhere under the shipping lanes, under the wind farms, under the ferries crossing between Harwich and Hoek van Holland, there is a riverbank where a man once sat, finished a harpoon out of red deer antler, and had no idea the water was already on its way.